If they had been lucky, they had 3 vintages in 10 years.
One vineyard, 2 totally different experiences.
We had been fighting in the old days, my father, my grandfather, rather to get the stuff ripe at all. Nowadays, global warming, you can't even say it loud. We are rather happy, Nowhere in the world you would pick wine, or grapes with 9 potential alcohol sugar ripeness, Riesling, if you do it right, can really age.
An absolute pleasure to have Ernst Lucen, or affectionately known as Erni. Hello, Erni.
Hey, how you doing, man?
An absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. Sans Carlos, he couldn't make it today, but that just means more wine for me, which is always a win. Erni, you're a character. I've been lucky enough to be able to, research you, knowing that you were coming in for a while, and I've been so excited about this meet and to hear your wine journey and talk about Dr. Lucen wines. Firstly, as a whole, I always love to speak about, time and place. Can you give us your history in German wine, and in particular, Riesling?
We run a typical family estate as it is in Europe, They're usually very long in ownership. In our case, the estate is nearly 200 years in the family. Since 200 years, we produce only Riesling. Riesling, that's the grape variety of our area. And our area is the Mosel River. So we are more or less the most western part of Germany along the French, Luxembourg, Belgium border. There's a kind of a triangle. And along these very steep slopes, we grow Riesling, The vineyards had been grown much longer because the Romans brought wine growing to our area, and that's already 2,000 years ago. We have a vineyard which is supposed to be the steepest vineyard in the world, and the name is Calmont, that was planted by the Romans already 2,000 years ago, which Caldus Montus, which is the very hot mountain,
And coming a bit of volcanic influence as well throughout the slate, and we're going to, of course, get into the different...
Exactly. We personally have 3 different, what the French call terroir or climat, and that is mostly is slate soil. That is basically the Mosel famous for. It is 90% slate. But we have also a vineyard or a village, which is the vineyards are 100% based on volcanic, weathered volcanic soil. That it makes the character of our wines. This soil is so dominant and shapes the character of our wines.
And we're lucky enough to have 4 in front of us from your range. I think a mixture of 2023 and 2022 vintages. What should we cheers and celebrate this moment with?
Well, the idea was to show the versatility of Riesling, because we have the same vineyard, but 4 different wines out of the same vineyard, because Riesling is so versatile. You can produce so many style of wines. Chardonnay is very famous, for example. Well, you can do an unoaked Chardonnay or an oaked Chardonnay, but that's it, But with Riesling, you can do so many styles of wine, like a dry wine, a medium dry wine, a very light fruity style wine, a little bit more sweeter style wine, all the way up to dessert style wine, noble sweet wines, all with the same grape variety as in the same vineyard, only by selection,
Yeah, so that comes from, hand selection.
Selection can't be machine harvest.
Yeah, and
that's
also
too steep anyway.
Of course, yeah. I was going to say no tractors can go up your slopes. But I guess also that influence can come from, the ripening of the vines and picking, 7 days later makes a big change. We're starting on our right-hand side.
On the right-hand side, yeah, exactly.
What's the first wine that we're trying?
The first wine is, again, as I said, it's all from the same grape variety and same vineyard. And this vineyard is called Wehlener Sonnenuhr. Wehlen is the village, where the vineyard is situated. And Sonnenuhr is the name of the vineyard, and that means sundial vineyard. Because our great uncle, Jodocus Brüm, built 1842. He built a sundial into the cliffs, into the vineyard, a big sundial. And then pretty soon, the vineyards around it had been called the sundial vineyard, the Sonnenuhr. Sonnenuhr means sun clock or whatever. And this wine is produced in the dry style.
It smells beautiful.
It's, I think, 22.
Mm-hmm.
And here with this wine, we do a very old style of winemaking with this dry wine, because basically the estate is an amalgamation of 2 estates. My mom was a single kid. My father was a single kid. Both inherited a wine estate, And so with marriage, 2 estates came together. But both families had a different tradition. My mom's family, and that is the wines we taste later, produced only fruity style wines with a little bit of residual sweetness. But my father's family produced only dry wines. And my grandfather fermented everything on natural yeast, in the big barrels, not in the small barrels like the French have, And after fermentation, he let the wine stay on the yeast, which had been settling down to the bottom, for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, even up to 8 years. Kept wines 8 years in the barrel on the full yeast before he wrecked it and bottled it. So this is a very old-fashioned dry winemaking, as it was done between 1880 and 1930s, where they had a lot of time, where they could wait and wait and wait. Nowadays, can you imagine that somebody waits 8 years before he's bottling his wine and getting it out of the barrel? But it makes great wines. And this is a good example for great dry wine, which is made in this old style. It's too young, to be frank. The old guys in our area, my grandfather, my grand-grandfather, my old uncles, they drink Riesling like claret, minimum 10, 15 years old. My grandfather always said, vintage plus 10, then you can start drinking.
I did see you having a 1993 yesterday, and I was quite jealous of that. Aged Riesling, because of Carlos.
Yes.
He would say that's a top 3 of his favorite wines. Not Riesling, aged Riesling.
Aged Riesling. 93, 32 years old.
Crazy.
And still great.
Yeah, still that acid you come to know and love. But there'll be a question from Carlos a little later on. I've got a video question for you from the Master Sommelier himself. But for people like myself learning about wine and this podcast becoming a bit of a resource for that, can you take us through the quality determination? We spoke about how bottles can be quite difficult for especially Australians, to read or to break down the styles of wine. Can you take us through a little bit of that kind of classification from cabinet all the way through to ice fine?
First, it is always, if you have a single vineyard, the single vineyard is always on the label, And in this case, of all 4 wines we have here in front of us, the vineyard is on the label. It's Wählener Sonnenur, Now, if we pick at a different time, we look to the sugar ripeness of the grapes. We looked a little bit to the acidity level. So a dry wine, you want to have a little bit higher sugar ripeness in the grapes, a longer hang time, a little bit lower acidity. Here we wait, like the first wine. Here we wait with picking the grapes to the optimum ripeness. But that means optimum ripeness, not over ripeness. We think that dry Riesling works best between 12 and 12.5 potential alcohol sugar ripeness, So here we wait until we get this, then we think we have the best harmony. We select only the healthy grapes out, to make dry wines. We don't want to have these botryticized, shriveled, noble, rotten grapes, so that we select them out too. And that is then later the noble sweet wine. But then we also have somehow a tradition for very elegant, refreshing, white Riesling, which we harvest very early, picking, that's the first grapes we pick, so then they're rather green, a little bit unripe, like, early picked strawberries. They're a little bit sour still, not so aromatic. We're looking for 9 to 10 potential alcohol sugar ripeness. Nowhere in the world you would pick wine, or grapes with 9 potential alcohol sugar ripeness, We can do it because we are so north. We have a long hang time. As longer the hang time with Riesling, as more aroma ripeness. And this high aroma ripeness balance out a little bit the lack of sugar ripeness, And that makes very refreshing, very crispy wines with low alcohol. I think this wine is only 8.5 alcohol, Beautiful wine to drink on its own. It's the high acidity, get a little bit balanced out with residual sweetness. We stop the fermentation, so it's the natural sweetness of the juice which balance out this high acidity, makes it a very crisp, the tension between acidity and the sweetness makes a beautiful wine to drink on its own. In the old days, my grandfather, when he received guests at 4:00 in the afternoon in England, they offer you a cup of tea, he offered a glass of Riesling cabinet, usually 10, 15 years old, because that was how the old guys drank the Riesling, rather old. And so that was barely at 4:00 our cup of tea.
And so just moving on to this second wine as well from our right, which one is this one?
That is the Cabernet. I just explained it. That is
I
the
thought it'd be
Cabernet.
nice to just try
the
that.
23 Cabernet from the same vineyard. You see, this is the first pick in the vineyard, we started with the dry wine. That's the last pick, So this is the last pick and this is the first pick, There's possibly 4 to 6 weeks difference in picking time, between the dry wine and the Cabernet. Well, that is usually beginning of October, middle of October, we start picking the Cabernet.
It is immediately just having the Cabernet now compared to the first dry wine. Just amazing to, really speak about one vineyard, two totally different experiences.
Look, only if you smell the two wines.
Yeah, it's true.
Completely, that couldn't be more different. Huh?
Yeah.
The very first pick, you have the green aroma structure, like green apple, white peach, great, tension between the acidity and a little bit the sweetness.
Although very different, more of a descriptor we would talk about with Australian Clare Valley, Eden Valley wines.
Yeah. Beautiful, refreshing wine, Easy to drink for breakfast. My grandma always said, this is a wine to drink yourself sober, with 8% alcohol,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, out of the ice bucket, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sitting in the garden, you don't need really food with it. You can drink it on its own, But these wines also are working now very well with Asian cuisine, especially if you have Asian cuisine, which is salty through the fish sauce or soya sauce, which is spicy because you have a chili or whatever in there, often fruits with it, sweet, sour, salty. Very difficult sometimes to have a wine with these kind of, like papaya salad, and this Vietnamese salad, to have a wine with it, an oaky Chardonnay, it doesn't work at all. But here, such a light, very light, slightly sweet, fruit-driven Riesling, works very well with this kind of food,
And moving on to just the third wine, just once again for a nose comparison, 3 completely different wines. As you can smell this beautiful sweetness off our third glass.
And you see it already also on the a little bit on the color.
Yeah.
The Cabernet is very pale, very young. So, and the next wine, again the same vineyard, and it's called Spätlese. This is the next pick, basically. Spät means later, Lese harvested. It means it's later harvested after the Cabernet.
Mm-hmm.
And that is usually 7, 8, depends on the weather, 7, 8, 9, 10 days later picked as the Cabernet. And what happens if you keep a fruit longer on the vine or longer on the tree, a strawberry picked early is not so aromatic, not so sweet, but for 2 weeks later, it's more red, more aromatic, more sweet. That is how fruit works, As longer you keep it on the bush, on the vine, on the tree, it gets more sugar ripe, it gets more aroma ripe. And that's the reason it's called Spätlese, later harvested, because the later harvest tells you this is later harvested as the Cabernet, has more aroma ripeness and has more sugar ripeness. The aroma structure changed from Cabernet to Spätlese. So here with Cabernet, you have more the green, stone fruit aroma, like green apple, white peach. Then with 10 days later harvested, it goes into white peach, yellow peach, stone fruit aroma, You see that change. It's not that massively more sugar ripe, but it is more aroma ripe,
And so different on the palate. God, beautiful. We're heading towards where I like to play. This is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, Cabernet I love to drink young, out of the ice bucket. Spätlese, the later harvest, I like to have a little more age on it, So here, I would say, the rule of my grandfather, vintage plus 10, is a good rule.
Yeah, I like that.
Having now 13 or 12, that is beautiful.
So obviously, the Mosel where you are, you have this incredible, the elevation is one thing. There's so many pieces, the soil, the slate.
And the steepness,
All of that speaks to your story and German Riesling as a whole. But, one thing that just talking about the difference between what 7 or 10 days can be, and that is ripeness of fruit. I don't like speaking about it, but I just think for Germany, I'm so interested. Like in Australia, we speak about it at length, I guess, on our podcast. But to get from you, Ernie, an idea of what global warming is sort of changing.
Yeah.
Obviously, Riesling being a colder climate, grape style. How are you seeing the
This
effects.
whole thing with a predicate system, Cabinet, Spätes, and later Auslese, there's kind of different ripeness levels, which goes with more time, 10 days, you have a different wine already. Another 5 days, you have a different wine. That works only in the northern Croing wine region, Only Riesling works, that you can have it on different ripeness levels, that you can pick it on different ripeness levels. Chardonnay wouldn't work. You couldn't pick a Chardonnay with 9 or 9.5. It would make a horrible wine. It needs to be always ripe, And sure, global warming, we can't say we don't care about global warming. But in our case, we are so north. We are still the most northern wine growing region in Europe in this size with 8,000 hectares. So we had been fighting in the old days, my father, my grandfather, rather to get the stuff ripe at all. If they had been lucky, they had 3 vintages in 10 years. They got ripe. And if we call ripe, if we talk ripe, we talk about 10.5 potential alcohol sugar ripeness, not 13, 14, or 15%, And so nowadays, global warming, you can't even say it loud. We are rather happy, because we suddenly get every year our fruit ripe, I still have, I always tell this story. 1980 was a horrible vintage, I still have the whole harvest 1980 in the cellar. Yeah. Because that was so horrible, it needs 45 years before it became drinkable, I'm happy that we don't experience these kind of vintages anymore, and that because due of global warming, Now we have it every year ripe, but not overripe. So we can make now every year this kind of lineup of wine, which was not possible in the old days. And so from that point of view, we have to wait, because a lot of people ask me always, when are you guys going to grow Shiraz on the Mosel? And I said, well, that will... I tell you, that will take definitely another 100 years or whatever.
Yeah, right.
So from that point of view, we have more extreme weather as we had in the old days. We have from one day to the other, you have, crazy rain, or it is quite dry, which we didn't experience in the old days. Or we have floodings. We're on the river, We have crazy floodings, in between 3 days, The river can raise 8, 9 meters, And so, these weather extremes, that's definitely, we have seen it much more than in the old days,
I guess that's also sort of a luxury when it comes to that much rainfall of the slopes, right? Just straight down the banks.
Yeah, and that is the good thing again with us, Everywhere in the world where you have slopes like this, super steep, you have terraces to protect for erosion, So... But we don't have terraces. Super steep, no terraces, because the soil, the slate soil, where you have 1 meter only stones, and then the pure cliff starts. So that means the soil is so drained. Even a very heavy rain, the water is just going through like a sieve. I had so many internships from all over the world. They said they never saw anything like that. Such a heavy rain, then everything is usually eroded. And here vineyards are staying the same.
A couple of good questions for you. Or a couple of quick questions for you, I guess. Best Riesling you ever had?
Oh, the best Riesling I ever had. The best Riesling is possibly the one which is most memorable, That was definitely a Riesling which was so astonishing for me from my great uncle. It was a Welener Sonnenur, the same wine, the same vineyard, a 1921 Feinste Auslese, Welener Sonnenur, Feinste Auslese, something like we taste at the end. And that was the reason that it was so memorable. 21, we're talking about a 100-year-old wine, and the wine was amazing, still astonishing. And the color was not deeper than this, It was amazing, And so that is what's still memorable with me, Because Riesling, if you do it right, can really age.
Yeah, wow. Well, we've made it to a point where I'm excited to try our final wine together. Cheers.
Cheers. And this is now a typical noble sweet Riesling, where we use only these kind of shriveled, raisined grapes due to the botrytis fungi. And these wines, which are basically here, this is about 50-60% botrytis grapes, 40 to 50% healthy grapes. But the botrytis, this noble rot, what we call, gives always some honeyed aromas, some honeyed aromas, and also a bit deeper in color. very high acidity balance out the sweetness of the wine,
Yeah.
It is rather a delicate sweet wine.
Yeah, if people were to think like, we've spoken about its noble one from Di Potelli, I believe.
Di Potelli,
Yeah.
And he
I'm
is
pretty sure-
famous for botrytis,
Yeah, and
He
he's
is famous for that,
sticky, like it comes
Yeah,
out
that is
like
more
a honey.
like Sauterne,
Yes,
That's
exactly.
more like Sauterne.
Exactly. This
but,
is not that.
Because with us, first Riesling produce high acidity, and if you shrivel the grapes, then you concentrate not only the sugar, you also concentrate the acidity. That means these kind of sweet wines or noble sweet wines have a very high acidity because of the concentration not only of the sugar, you have also high acidity, and that very high acidity can balance out this high sweetness to a very delicate sweetness. That is basically rather as biting into a very ripe apple, which is also sweet but has acidity, or a nice ripe peach or whatever, where you have, and that is very important for us, the acidity with the sweet wines, to make it delicate. And that's the reason also that this 21 Auslese, which I had, Velna Sonnenwetter, was still so beautiful, because this high acidity gives low pH and can make these wines age very well,
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's also only, what is it? We're talking also only about 8% alcohol,
Oh, really?
Yeah, 8% alcohol.
Shit.
Yeah, that is the difference to Sauterne, They have 14.5% alcohol.
Yeah, that's what I was
and
expecting.
And this is only 8%
I mean,
alcohol,
I'm not getting affected by it, obviously, because it's not there, but
Yeah.
I'm just getting the acid.
Yeah,
So coming through, beautiful.
8% alcohol. That's typical for this style of wine. And they have twice as much acidity as a Sauterne. Sauterne is 4.5 acidity. This is 10 gram. And that makes it so elegant, so nice finesse, and with age also beautiful, that is also, it would be not really a dessert wine because it's not sweet enough for dessert, but it is for...
I think for Australian palates,
yeah.
We do have a lot of like US audience. So, I'm not going to speak to, preferences, but I think in Australia, this would be, as they would call it sweet, not understanding where that other end of the spectrum is.
Yes, exactly.
But just for reference, out of the lineup, this is my favorite.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
gorgeous.
it's gorgeous.
Absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Ernie, I've got a question for you from Carlos. It's a video question.
Hello, Erni. This is Carlos. We met before at the wine dinner a long time ago, but I'm sure you won't remember me, but I remember you very well, very charismatic, and so lovely to be in chat with you again. I have, obviously, I can't be there today, so I'm really, really sorry about that, but knowing that you are based in Bernkastel, but how do you compare Bernkastel to the other villages, and what differences do they make?
Yeah, well, so sure, we have a lot of villages along the Mosel, so basically you can say every kilometer, every 1.5 kilometer is another village, with each village has vineyards around the village, and so therefore you have these many vineyard names, Velen, the Sonnenuhr. The next village to Velen is Krach, is the Himmelreich, the kingdom of heaven, We are in Bernkastel, up the road, we have Bernkastelei. So every village has its own vineyards, with their own name. And the difference is, there is difference. That is the funny thing. Even that it is all slate soil, and most of these soils are south-facing, which is the best, and very steep. Same soil, but still the wine can be slightly different. I wouldn't say it's a huge difference, but you have the difference as we see it here through the picking. Then everybody has a little bit different kind of idea about how he should make the wine. I don't want to have any botrytis with my dry wine, with my cabinet. There are other producers think, a little bit of botrytis in the cabinet and the dry wine makes more complex wine, he thinks. I don't think so. But it makes a different wine, But then it's also the microclimate of the soil itself, or the vineyard, Some vineyards are 100% south-facing, southwest-facing, southeast-facing, a little bit less steep, a little bit more steep, a little bit lower elevation, a little bit higher elevation. All these, what we call microclimate factors, even that is only a little bit in the same vineyard or a village or further down, that makes already a difference, So it's quite complex, But all over all, I would say, if you talk about region, I think it is pretty easy to, in a blind tasting, to say, this is a Mosel Riesling, or this is a Clare Valley Riesling, or this is a Washington State Riesling, and so, because the Mosel has this kind of very unique character, which is basically based on the slate soil. This is no other area has this in Germany, this kind of massive slate soils everywhere, and that gives if you go through all these wines, they have a certain character, and that this is a kind of racy acidity, It doesn't matter if it is sweet or if it is dry, it has this kind of mineral-driven acidity which comes from the slate, and that you don't get from sand soil, that you don't get from limestone and any others, or granite, This kind of racy, mineral-driven acidity which you see through a sweet wine as all the way through the dry wine that you find only with slate soil.
This has been epic. It's been a mouth salivating episode. Thanks to the high acid of Riesling. It's one of those amazing grapes that I was trying to figure out a nice way of saying this. It's like your favorite insert sports player's favorite sports player. So it's not LeBron James, it's LeBron James's favorite undermarked player. This is winemaker's favorite wine for a reason, and it's great to learn a lot about it from you, Erni, and we appreciate your time. I know it's short.
Thanks for the invitation.
Always a whirlwind trip, and thank you so much for sharing your experience, your passion, your joy. So Erni, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks.
As Carlos would say, salud to you.
Cheers.
And to many more beautiful Dr. Lucens. Thank you.